Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kylee Cast. I'm Kylee Griswold, managing editor at The Federalist. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you don't know, we have a new channel specifically for the Kylee Cast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you are only subscribed to the Federalist Radio Hour or You Are Wrong with Molly Hemingway and David Harsani, two of our other wonderful Federalist podcasts, please also subscribe to the Kylee Cast as well. Leave us a 5-star review. That is one of the easiest ways you can help out the show. And even better yet, if you're just listening to the show, go check out the full video version on my personal YouTube channel or the Federalist's channel on Rumble. And then, of course, like and subscribe there too. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at radio@thefederalist.com. I would love to hear from you. Today, I am so excited to welcome to the Kylee Cast, Leigh Fitzpatrick Snead. Leigh is a fellow at the Catholic Association, and she is also the author of the brand new book, Infertile But Fruitful. In the book, Leigh walks through her personal story of infertility and what it was like going to see a doctor that did not align with her Catholic worldview, that really tried to immediately push her toward IVF. She also talks about then pivoting to a different doctor that worked with her wants and desires and within her Christian beliefs. She talks about adoption and the difference between a desire for a baby and a desire for pregnancy. She talks about breastfeeding. She talks about her faith and her life and her marriage. There is truly something in this book for everyone, especially because even if you don't personally struggle with infertility, you either know somebody or will know somebody who struggles with this. And it's just such a good resource to help understand and have more compassion for people who are walking through this road that can be so dark and so lonely and so difficult. I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation. We had a great time. Definitely don't sleep on the opportunity to pick up Leigh's brand new book. It's such an easy and delightful read. I found myself crying at parts and laughing at parts. It's very thought-provoking, and she also offers a lot of helpful, practical lessons that she's learned along the way that you can implement in your life, whether you struggle with infertility or not. So without further ado, please welcome to the show, Leigh Fitzpatrick Snead. Leigh, thank you so much for coming on the Kylee Cast. It is such a privilege and an honor to have you.
Kylee, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, I was telling Leigh right before we started recording that because I review so many books and do so many interviews with authors on the podcast, often reading a review copy of a book means more like heavy skimming or speed reading. And I sat down with Leigh's book and I read it in one sitting and I could not put it down. And it was like a full, thorough, not a speed read. I was just completely engrossed by it. At the end of every chapter, you just have to keep reading because there's just so much great stuff as part of her story. So I don't know if there's like a better recommendation to a book than one that you just can't put down. So everybody should read Leigh's book. But
I'll take it.
um, yeah, Leigh, I don't want to give the book away, but can we just start by you giving us just kind of a 30,000-foot view of walking us through your story, to just kind of give people a sense of who you are, where you come from, and what brought you to write this book?
Yeah, well, I met my husband in college, freshman year. We got married soon after. Um, we saw each other at church. And we, you know, it's sort of, we put off kind of casually having kids because we were younger and, we were living in DC and sort of that lifestyle. None of our friends were even married really. Um, at first. And so we put it off, and then we really started trying to have a baby in earnest. And a year went by and no baby. And over the years, we sought different medical treatments at different times. We decided to pursue adoption actually simultaneously with trying to still get pregnant. Um, and I was in graduate school for philosophy, but I left my program with a master's when my first son was born. And I eventually got into doing some freelance writing. And that sort of ebbed and flowed over the years. My husband's a professor at Notre Dame. And we, we left DC, we built a life here in Indiana. Um, I started working with the Catholic Association a few years ago, doing more writing and hosting our syndicated radio show, Conversations with Consequences. And I had written a couple articles for the National Catholic Register about my infertility experience, I think maybe even for National Infertility Week or something. And one of them was an open letter to those suffering from infertility. And it resonated. I got a lot of messages, a lot of comments, a lot of sharing, a couple just really great stories from that. I had some friends who I actually didn't realize were suffering from infertility that reached out, and then that sort of blossomed into a really very full friendship with them. Another young married man was up at night searching for answers. He and his wife weren't getting pregnant, and they were, sad and not knowing what to do. And he was just looking, and he came across my article and then saw my last name and realized that he had been a student of my husband's. And so we've maintained a friendship with them too after that.
It's so
So I had
providential. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I had a mentor who thought the same thing, and she said, "Lee, this is your book."
Mm,
And so then I decided I put it together, and I was in my late 40s. It was sort of that time was come I mean, it was closed, but in your brain you kind of have to get used to the idea. You have to be able to say, I am never going to get pregnant,
mm,
because no one ever told me that. No doctor has ever said that to me.
mhm,
But they would now, because I'm 50, and I think I've never been pregnant so far.
mhm,
So, um, being able to say that and being like, okay, this is where I am now. Now I can go back. I just want people to be able to. I want people to be able to see themselves in a book, because I feel like we're kind of unrepresented in all kinds of stuff, whether it's nonfiction or fiction or entertainment or just culture at large. I mean, you see families with biological children everywhere, and or just families with children in general. And I think that the conversation is getting better and
mhm,
more fruitful all the time. And I think a lot of people are writing and talking about it, which is fantastic. But infertility needs to be something that everyone is, at least a little bit fluent in, and
mhm.
is used to talking about, and aren't uncomfortable talking about it. I think that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of like break the ice on the conversation.
Yeah, and I think your book does that really well because I think for people who do struggle with infertility, it's such a great book for them to feel seen and to feel like I'm not alone and there are other people who struggle with this, especially because you do include other stories besides your own
Yeah.
in the book that are so different from yours.
Right.
Just to give people hope who maybe are in the same struggle. But I think it also really helps people who do have children or who are pregnant or who don't suffer from this to kind of understand what that road looks like and how to come alongside somebody who struggles with that and be a better friend and a better sister or whatever it might be to those couples too.
Exactly, especially when you say sister, because I think that's who I've heard from a lot. Is like, I didn't know how to talk to my sister about
Mm.
this.
Mhm.
And especially if you come from a big family, and maybe all your mother obviously had lots of children, maybe your sisters are having lots of children, and you're sort of the odd man out. People, they wanna help and they wanna be there for you, but they don't wanna make you feel worse, and oftentimes they say nothing, and then you don't know how to bring it up, and maybe you're kind of ashamed, and so you don't bring it up with them, and so no one talks, and then everybody just gets kind of lonelier and sadder. I
Mhm.
think there's a belief too when you're suffering with infertility that, "I'm not gonna really talk about this, I'm just gonna wait it out,
Mm.
because one day I'm gonna get pregnant,
Mhm.
and that'll be the news, and that'll be my story, and I won't have to think about any of this other dark stuff again." Um, but you need to be ready for that not to happen. And I think
Mhm.
it's more common than you think. I mean, it's still, I think I've heard anything between like 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 couples, but it's again, that could be just a delay, that it takes more than a year, the typical year for somebody under
Mhm.
35 to get pregnant.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, and especially just the loneliness and the isolation that comes from that. Like the enemy loves nothing more than to isolate us and to make us feel like we're alone
oh
or to
yeah,
drive us into the dark corners of not opening up about these things and not finding people who can mentor us and disciple us or even just sit with us in our grief. That's
right.
such a lonely place to be. And that's exactly where he wants us to be. So,
Exactly, and that's when you start feeling that, and I really try to be honest about those dark and raw kind of moments when, you're jealous. You're jealous of people. You're envious, you're resentful, it's hard to take joy in
mhm,
other people's joy. There's a lot of "why me?" or "why not me?"
mhm,
Um, there's a lot of, you get weird thoughts with, like, about your husband, about, like, he should have married somebody else, or,
mm,
like, just really dark things. I think I
yeah.
even tell the story in the book about, I remember one couple times I had a dream that my 50-year-old mom at the time was pregnant, because, like,
Mhm,
obviously everybody can get pregnant
right,
except for me.
right, right.
Yeah, and so I think that's right. I think you need that accompaniment with, your friends, and I hope that, like, pastors and, seminarians and priests, and they read it too, so that when they have a couple in their flock that need this help, that they kind of have that language ready to talk to them, or can just share my book.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
One of the things I love about your book is that at the end of each chapter, it is your story, but it's not just your story. You also give really practical tips and like takeaways and advice. I don't remember exactly what you call it, but they're just like little
Lessons
nuggets of
along the way,
things,
I think.
lessons along the way. Yes, and they're
Hmm.
great lessons. And one of them from early in the book, you talk about how you met your husband when you were fairly young and you dated for a
Hmm.
few years, but when you got married, none of your friends were married or had babies, and so it was just like the normal thing to do to wait. And I think one of the lessons that you give is like you don't have to wait. It's
Yeah.
actually good to get started early. Can you just speak to like the cultural messaging that we get about you don't want to be the first one to have kids when all your friends are still out traveling and all these things, like what do you think contributes to some of that messaging, and maybe talk to somebody who is freshly married, like what do you think they should do?
I think even as now that I'm the parent of a 20-year-old now, um, I can see why parents can fall into that trap of sort of, yes, on paper, this is what we believe, and I hope you find your husband and you get married and this, but you've invested money and time into your child's education. You want them to be proud. You maybe want them to go to graduate school.
Mm,
You want them to do this. And maybe have a concern that you want your daughters to be financially secure and you don't want them to take those risks because that's your baby. And so
right.
you're protective of them. And so you project a little bit of those expectations onto people, I think, even though sort of culturally you might be totally on board with the early marriage, early babies thing.
Hmm.
And that's something we do probably without even knowing about. Um, I think another thing to consider is that, if you really don't want kids yet, maybe it's not time to be married yet.
Mm,
Um, I mean, obviously, I treasure those first couple of years. We really had, a really fun time, but it's I think that we could have also done that while still, going a courting. Um,
mhm.
you know, uh, but it's again, I mean, I don't know, I'm all in favor I think people put off marriage for the same reasons. They think, "Oh, I need to do this first."
Mhm,
Whereas, I mean, my husband and I met when I was 19, he was 21. We did a lot of growing up together. I think we're glad about that now. We made a
mhm.
lot of mistakes, and we're the only 2 that know. Like some embarrassing stories and things like that. Gotta keep it in the vault. Um, and, I think that we were able to, because we grew up differently than we were brought up. I mean,
Mhm,
we our house is different from the houses that we grew up in with divorced parents, and I was an only child. But we had meeting young, we had time to sort of craft and plan for the life and to kind of gather information as we went along.
mhm.
Um, yeah, I think does that address the question? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah,
It was
definitely.
multifaceted. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, well, and
Yeah.
I think one of the messages, like, I hadn't really thought about the parental component of it, of, even the messages that you get from your parents where they want certain things for you, that
Mhm.
maybe would delay some of those things, but also, of course, we get so much cultural messaging now, and it's so much secular messaging, but even, some people believe it's pro-life messaging, which I would disagree with, and I think you would too, that, well, it doesn't really matter when you start trying to have babies because you can always freeze your eggs or you can always pursue IVF, or
Right.
basically just that there's always a backstop. There's always a fallback. Even if things don't work out for you, there's always a way to remedy that. And
Right.
you talk in the book about a couple of different doctors that you pursued over the course of your struggle with infertility. And the first
Mhm.
one being one that really pushed for IVF. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that doctor and kind of like some of the pitfalls that associated your pursuit in trying to get answers to your infertility?
Yeah, well, so my husband was actually working as the general counsel for the President's Council on Bioethics with Leon Cass under George W. Bush.
Mhm,
And he was the chief drafter of a government report called Reproduction and Responsibility, right around the time we were really trying to get pregnant. And so basically, as we went on every month not being pregnant, he was also every month learning about something that can go wrong and the
mm,
different ways they treat it and the ethical implications of those things. And so it was like we were being hit at on all sides. Like,
yeah.
this is the fertility world. But at the same time, you think, okay, because he met with, infertility associations and things like that, he knew the names. And plus, we lived in DC. We had access to a lot of doctors.
Mhm,
This doctor, I think, had been like featured in Washingtonian Magazine and
okay.
everything. And we're thinking, okay, well, he probably does some stuff we don't agree with, but he's really good. And again, you think I'm in my 20s. This has got to be an easy fix.
Mhm,
go to the great doctor, you get in, you get out, we're gonna
Right.
fix it, it's gonna be easy. Um, and so we went and we thought we were armed with our what we called our, like, our Catholic infertility playbook. We thought, "We'll write the rules,"
Mhm.
and he wasn't having it. I mean, he told us all the time, "I'm a cradle Catholic. I don't see what the big deal is." And, he's like, "I'd really like to enroll you in my IVF program, enroll me in the program." Because I mean, it was like 26, 27, I think at the time. So, I was great for success rates.
Yeah, right.
Maybe. I mean, who knows? But,
Right.
um,
How
was,
long did you see him before he expressed an interest in enrolling you in IVF? Like, was that right off the
oh,
bat?
right off the bat.
Yeah.
And so we had to kind of like see like, "Hey, can we do some more diagnostic tests, like x-rays and stuff?" And so it kind of humored us, thinking that eventually we'd crack. I think it's what they do because every month when we'd have a meeting, after, he'd sort of like, what's the, well, I can't think of the word, but he didn't really want to, but he gave us these big kind of Band-Aid treatments. Not really,
Mhm.
no, that Band-Aid treatment, that's not really what I'm looking for. The word I'm looking for is like he was trying to pacify us until we
Yes.
could until we just would agree to do what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And sorry for that word jumble.
You're good.
The we go in, he'd be like, "Okay, so what do you think now? What do you think now? This medicine's really not working for you. Let's do IVF. Let's do IVF." And I think that was about maybe like 4 or 5 months in, and, we're like, "We told you, no, that's not what we're gonna do.
Mhm.
Is there something else?" And, he got so enraged and frustrated with us, he pointed back to his lab saying, "I'm creating life back there, not destroying it." And,
Were you
my
just
husband
so taken aback? Like, I don't even know
Oh, I'm having a
how I
physical
would've
reaction right now just remembering it. It
Yes.
was awful. And to think this is the person that's supposed to be, like, caring for you, your
Yes.
body, especially if it's something so intimate as your fertility. So, my husband grabbed my hand, we walked out. I don't even think we checked out at the desk, and we just never went back.
Yeah.
And the weird sort of anecdotal part of it is, and I do try to make great, efforts to not conflate infertility and adoption because I think they're two, you might have a calling to adoption, you might not be infertile, you might be infertile and not called to adoption.
Mhm.
But about 9 months after we walked out of that office, my oldest, was born.
That
So,
is so redemptive and
yep,
just
yep,
beautiful. Yeah.
yep.
And it's
It was
just
the
so
right thing to do.
crazy to hear that story. Like, because you think there's probably a lot more women who, well, there's plenty of women who see no ethical qualm with IVF. And the second the doctor, recommends it, especially because so much of unexplained infertility is just unexplored infertility. Not
Mhm,
all of it, of course, but if you're
right.
being pushed toward IVF the moment you walk into a fertility clinic, that's clearly not something that they're exploring. And so
Yeah,
just the number of women who are just put onto this cash cow conveyor belt of IVF and they don't see anything wrong with it. And many of them then do see something wrong with it later down the road and have lots of regrets about it. But just
sure.
those women. And then you have the few that, are seeking real treatment, a real answer for their infertility. And they know for a fact, no, we are not going to do this. We're not going to do this. You walk out of that clinic. How many other women walk in there with a vague notion of, no, we don't want to pursue IVF, but they face that kind of pressure and that kind of pushback and just that persistence and anger from a doctor who's
Yes.
supposed to be caring for you. And just, I mean, that is so much pressure. And,
Yeah,
especially people who are not well catechized or not, not theologically sound. I don't know, just
yeah.
like how little pushback it would take to cave to a doctor that's that persistent and
Yeah,
awful.
because it's really, really tempting.
Mhm.
When you go in there, the walls are plastered with baby pictures.
Mhm.
There are pregnant women everywhere, and you think you try to you in those late at night when you're kinda crazy in and out of sleep, you start thinking like, "What if we just did 1 embryo?
Mhm.
What if just 2?" No extras. We wouldn't selectively reduce. All these things you're trying to make these is could it be okay, And it's tough. And again, that's again why you need that support, why you need to have your family and your loved ones around you so that you're not dealing with those sort of temptations alone. Because if you're already dealing with your infertility and secrecy, I think it's not easy, it's not hard to imagine doing IVF also in secrecy. Maybe because your community, you're also surrounded by people who don't, want to do IVF, but you think you just do it and then nobody knows, and I never have
Mhm.
to think about that again.
Mhm. And it's just those thoughts are so that's always where the pro-life mind goes, right? Because it's you so badly desire for people to be helped who are struggling with this, but to be helped
Yeah,
in a way that doesn't violate our consciences and doesn't violate our view of the sanctity of life. And I
yeah,
just had a really good conversation with Katie Faust recently about
mm,
IVF specifically and just her talking about the fact that like even if this is what you desire, if you talk to a an IVF fertility doctor about these desires, they won't even do them. Like, they won't even let you do a cycle with just, one embryo or two embryos because they need you to come back for more. They need you to
right.
have embryos frozen there. Like, it is such a racket. And so it's just heartbreaking because it's such a exploitative process. And you know,
Well,
people
right.
who are in their most vulnerable state and just preying on that good God-given desire to bear children. And
Yeah, 100%. And I think you hit on this a little bit ago about the not getting to these root causes. And so that's why it's really heartening to see the proliferation of these restorative reproductive medicine doctors and
yes.
naprotechnology doctors being trained by Dr. Hilgers in Nebraska, and or just even people who advertise themselves like I'm a doctor, I'm also a man or woman of faith,
Mhm.
and we can work on this together. I talked to one person who had helped actually with a different part of my book, and she and her husband were having some problems that she couldn't find anyone to help with. Conventional doctors, even some of the restorative medicine doctors weren't able to help her. But what she found was a Jewish practice. And while they had no problem doing, these two doctors had no problems with IVF, and they suggested it a couple of times. They were also very strong in their faith,
Mm.
and so they respected my friend's views too, and so they were able to actually to successfully treat her, and I think she has 4 children now.
Yeah, that makes all the difference is finding a
Yeah.
provider that shares your values and even if they don't share them, respects them from
Respects
the
them.
outset. Yes.
Respect, yes.
That's so important. I
Mhm.
was actually gonna ask you about NAPRO next and
Yeah.
your alternate fertility, treatment seeking with, Dr. Hilgers, and can you just explain more in detail what NAPRO technology is and, like, what the Creighton model is?
Sure. I mean, this is going to be, just like the laywoman's explanation. There are lots of people out there who can get into the nitty-gritty details with
Mhm,
you. It's a sympto well, it's symptomatic charting,
mhm,
and we have these different stickers that indicate different kinds of body signs, for
mhm,
your fertility,
mhm,
and, the when you are under the care of a physician, you'll for infertility, you'll have, like, blood work done, and there'll be adjustments to, hormone levels, things that are you should have going for you anyway. In
mhm,
fact, like, lots of young women are now learning the method early to figure out what's going on, like, "Why is my PMS so bad?"
mm.
Um, I actually have a friend who's, a NAPRO, practitioner and also practices it, and she actually detected through charting her own precancerous cells.
That is crazy.
I mean, it's amazing. The ways that this affects the quality of your life are just so far reaching, so far beyond even just being able to achieve pregnancy when you can't.
Yes.
And I think
And
now I
such a
think
rebuke to the other way of just putting you on this quick fix method. Like, there's so many underlying things, in health
yeah,
that just they need to be addressed. And, I even think like now so many women use and men use these Aura rings, which is obviously
yeah,
different, but that also gives you so many,
yeah,
indicators of your body and, like, the way that it can tell you, "You're probably gonna get sick tomorrow,"
yeah,
because of
I
what your
know.
body temperature is or, like, something that seems a little off, and it's just like, your body gives so many signs about everything, and so tracking those is just such a holistic way to approach something that often
Yeah.
does have such distinct underlying causes, so I'm sorry,
This
I
I
totally
no,
cut you off.
no, I love it. I love how excited you are about it. There's a real, I think, generational shift that's
Mhm.
happening too, that people are
Yes.
turning to that. People are throwing away their hormonal birth control pills and things like that, respecting their bodies more, which makes sense when you think about like matcha drinking and, yoga lattes and all these other, things that
Mhm.
we're doing for ourselves. Why are we putting these, chemicals into our bodies all the time too? But I think that part of it is that big business thing we just talked about. I mean, a lot of these strategies, a lot of them take time. to
Mhm.
heal if you're really addressing these underlying root causes. And I think that conventional doctors often want you on the schedule. And once you pass, the 1 year mark, and then maybe you've done, I mean, if you're willing to pay, I think a lot of doctors will let you try IVF until, the money runs out.
Mhm.
But,
Of course.
but I think that, I know women who have really, younger women, who have stuck with it for years and have just continued seeing doctors and trying different things, doing things like diet, which obviously is not going to affect you your next cycle. You know what I mean? Like that's going to
Mhm.
take time.
Right.
Inflammation, all these different things. And, 6 years later, they're having a healthy pregnancy.
Mhm.
But because you're not on that fast track, this artificial timeline that people
Right.
create.
Right.
And again, if it's true, if you've bent to your own like, feelings, or maybe you didn't meet the right guy or woman until you were older, yeah, you're under the clock a little bit, and you need to
Mhm.
respect that. But these yeah, the idea that it's over for you and there's only this one solution, um, is just it's maddening.
Mhm. Can you talk about you discuss in the book the difference between the desire for pregnancy and the desire for a baby. Can you explain what you mean by that distinction and kind of how that manifested for you?
Yeah, and that's actually it's really good timing with that question because I was just sort of thinking it. I don't know if I would have had it in me to stick with it 5, 6, 7 years.
Mm.
Really wanted to be a mom with a baby right
Mhm.
now, and I think some people have the mettle to go the distance,
Mhm.
and can do it, but I never we never stopped trying to have, even if we weren't under care, we never stopped, like, being open to life and really wanting to be pregnant,
Right.
um, but it's, once that door opened and we saw that, I mean, really, I had a real clear message, um, "You're an adoptive mom," and, yeah, I knew it, but then he told me.
Mhm.
So, uh, this, yeah, and it just was so clear to us that that was our vocation,
Mhm.
that, if we had other babies, that was fine, but this is something that we could do and we wanted to do, and yeah, and so that made it easier for me. I do think that, other people really want to experience pregnancy, and I
Mhm.
do. I mean, I still mourn that, idea, um, but, in the end, I wasn't hesitant to jump on the adoption train pretty early.
Mhm.
But it was my first son was 3 when we saw Dr. Hilgers, just to sort of put people,
Okay.
let them know the timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, just the clarity that your call was to parenthood, if not to pregnancy.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the trip that you took. Was it to London for 6
Yeah,
months?
my
Yes.
husband, yeah, taught in the London program in Notre Dame for 6 months, and we decided to take a break from our treatments with Dr. Hilgers, just because it's, like, a lot of medicine and needles and stuff,
Mhm.
and it just felt like I already felt being in Indiana, away from him in Nebraska was already kind of far enough, putting an
Mhm.
ocean between seemed like too much. And then you just having, like, suitcase full of needles and whatever, and we thought, "Okay, great, 6 months, let's just take a little break," and the needles really do get to you. I mean, I got to a point where I think all the blonde ladies out there will understand this, that even just getting foils for highlights was I was just so sick of being, like, messed with all the
Yes.
time,
Yes.
um, that it was nice to just have a break,
Mhm.
and we really had a nice time. We just had our first son. He was 4, he turned 5, and we were there. We went to the theater, we went to restaurants, we did lots of cultural things. We traveled to Italy for 2 weeks to see friends there. It was just really, really great. And when we were ready to go home, we're sort of, making sure, or, our son was enrolled for school the next year, and because it was like May, June, I guess, and everything was in line for us to come home with the dog sitter, or whatever. I thought, oh, I should probably call Dr. Hilgers and let him know, coming home, and what do I need to do to get started back up again? Do I need to go get blood work done? And my husband said, maybe let's just not. Let's just adopt again.
Mm.
And it was almost like he gave me my permission to give myself permission to stop, because
Mm.
you do feel that pressure, like, "I gotta keep doing this, I've gotta keep doing this."
Yeah.
Um, because it's, it's going to work. And we got a 75% chance of success. That's what, he predicted for us. And it was such a relief to be like, okay, but again, like not forever off the table. I always, thought about it again a couple times, but it just didn't make sense for us. I think we thought if it happens, it happens. But if not, we know that this is a way that we can be parents, and it works for us. And so again, we got home, and it wasn't very long before we got our home study done. And so we got home, say like June of 2010, and in March 2011, we got a call from our agency saying, hey, we got all your paperwork, background checks, criminal records, blah, blah, blah. Everything looks good. We'll let what's going on with your profile. Every month we'll check in with you. But by the way, there's a woman who's expecting twins at the end of this month. Are you open to being considered by her? And we're like, oh, sure. And we're thinking,
Mhm.
great, this is great. We're getting a little nibble now. Um, Definitely this is our year. We'll get a baby. And then the next day she wanted to talk to us. And then the next day we were going to take her out to lunch. And then she was admitted to the hospital. And that night the twins were born.
That is so
So
cool.
that's about 48 hours. Yeah. We still haven't quite recovered 14 years later, almost 15 years later. He just
I don't
like
know if you
cares.
ever will.
No, 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 no.
There was this
Um,
passage from your book where you're
mm,
talking about that, and just yeah, I'll just read this
mm,
passage because it was so beautiful to me. Often bleary eyed and with your first son right there in the mix, we three gazed at our two sweet and snuggly little miracles and knew, just knew with every bone in our tired bodies, that leaving the needles behind and instead preparing ourselves for another adoption was exactly what we had been meant to do. I'm sitting on my couch reading this by the fire, literally just crying. It was just so beautiful. And I just love that, and the way that your husband gave you permission, that you felt just that relief and that permission to just
yeah,
give your body a break. And I also just love, like, inherent in your story in London is just also the beauty and the importance of the fact that when you're going through struggles like this, because when you start trying to get pregnant, that becomes kind of your sole focus, especially if it doesn't
yep,
happen right away. Like, that is the only thing. You are like one track mind. This is what we're doing.
y
And just the importance of, your marriage to your spouse, it will still always be the most important relationship you have. And it's
yep,
so important to prioritize that, and just like the beauty of having that time to reconnect away from the constant bombardment and pressure and feeling of, this is what we're doing, we got to track, we got to do this and that. And just,
yeah,
there's so much redemption and beauty even in that part of the story. And it's like there was not a conception in that part of the story, and still it was
no.
so beautiful and redemptive. And I mean, I love the title of your book for that reason too, because throughout every page, it's just like, yes, it is about infertility, but it is also such a fruitful story. And I was just overwhelmed by that over and over throughout the whole book. So,
Oh, I'm so glad because that really is the message, I think. And I think again, like, I think it's one of the reasons why I was felt like I needed to write it now, is that, I want people to look at our family and say like, "Oh, hey, they never got pregnant." You know, that's not
mhm,
so bad what they've got
mhm,
going on there, like,
mhm,
that's a happy life. And,
right.
yeah, and again, and that's why I wanted to include other women's stories too, like I like to call the other flavors of infertility. Especially the story of, Anne, who she and her husband don't have children, because there are lots of, women with infertility who, don't have a calling to adopt, or for whatever reason don't adopt children. And I think that culturally, in Christian Catholic circles, sometimes we don't know what to do with them. So again, we don't talk to them about it,
Mhm,
and it's kind of like, well, they must not care that they were infertile because they didn't adopt, or do you know what I mean? Like those
right,
weird little assumptions you can make.
right.
Um, and I know because even though I am on the infertile side, I make assumptions like that about people all the time. It's just human nature.
Mhm,
You just want to kind of wonder about, you get nosy about people's business, and of course you can't ask because that's like the most intimate thing
mhm,
ever. Um, but I think that when we reduce fruitfulness to just baby, we forget about, like, the fruitfulness of, like, our Catholic priests are celibate, they're fruitful,
mhm.
like, it's not just and married couples, and after you're done raising your children, you're still called to be fruitful.
Yep.
As a single person, you're called to be
Yes.
fruitful. So, I think it's really easy to think that your purpose in life, your God-given purpose is not is and you're failing because you're not having a baby.
Mhm,
And to open up our idea of what real fruitfulness can mean, whether that means hospitality or, godparents or you're a writer or your other gifts to the world. I mean, anything. And I feel like it's not even, you can't even really give examples because you don't know what your fruits will be, if there'll be fruits, and you know what I mean? You don't
Yes,
know
yes,
until, yeah, you've shared them, right? You've
yes.
shared these things and then they bear even more fruit. So I think that that's a really important thing to remember, is to really think about people who choose not, or who don't adopt, and we still need to embrace them. And we still have to assume that they also suffered too.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. I don't want them to go forgotten because it's easy, again, like, I think like, "Oh, it's great. They were infertile and then they adopted babies, and that's great." But, it's not, life can be really great even without children,
Yes.
and if that's,
Yes.
but and it's hard because every time we get reminded that we don't get to choose what happens with our lives, that's hard, and this is a
Mhm.
big one,
Mhm.
especially, for women, especially I think for Christian women. Um, but yeah, it's a yeah, a thing.
Yeah. I have a number of Christian female friends who badly desire to be moms and wives, and they
Mhm.
still are having trouble with the first step of just, like,
Yeah.
really struggling with singleness, and yet I look at their lives and there is so much fruitfulness there, and so much of that does come from still the God-given motherhood instinct and gift that women have been given. And you
Right.
write, um in your book, even if infertile, quote, our vocation to motherhood is no mistake. And I think
Yeah.
even for women who, it's not just for women who are infertile, but they are adoptive mothers. It's also for women who are still single and desiring marriage and motherhood, who
Yes.
fulfill that role and are just, they're using their God-given biological gifts to motherhood long
Yeah.
before they will even be wives and mothers. And I thought that was a really beautiful part of the book also, as I
Yeah.
watch women walk that out right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can mother your friend. I mean,
Yes.
we have this capacity for motherhood, and motherhood, again, isn't just about raising your own biological children. It's about the way you approach the world. It's the way, you just, it's what you bring to the workplace. I mean, it's sort of, it's everything. It's who we are.
Mhm.
And so I think that it's, but I have to tell you, when you're in the midst of it, and when you're in the depths of despair, it's these kind of thoughts, they kind of skim right off,
Mhm.
the surface. And so I
Right.
was thinking about our podcast today and thinking about what we might talk about. And I know that I say in the book that I wrote it for like the 20-year-old me or 25-year-old me, the book I wish I had in my 20s, but I'm not sure I would have been able to sort of stick with it. I think I don't, that makes me sort of rethink that. I mean, I do think it's important to think about a life that doesn't, your fertility journey doesn't end in pregnancy. And I think that's good. And I like to prove that we're a positive example of, what that looks like. But, I think that, it's really hard to listen. It's really hard to listen to anyone, unless it's someone calling you from the doctor's office telling you that your blood test shows that you're pregnant, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and again, that goes back to what we talked about right at the start of it, taking this out of the shadows, talking about it, writing about it, letting everyone know about it, people understanding what IVF is, what that means. Why
Mhm.
don't I just do IVF? Like, people have a kind of a working knowledge of that, and and also can just empathize more, can understand, like, what's that like? What do my children mean to me? What would that have been like if I hadn't been able to get pregnant?
Mhm.
And then also I think too, on our side, it's our side, the infertility side. You can get a little edge to you after a while. And I think it's important to see, the crosses that other people carry. For
Mhm.
instance, I mean, I know a couple who, they just sort of like wave to each other across the room and they have another child. And, that's been a kind of a cross for them, that sort of like mega uber fertility, financially, for their other children, for her body,
Mhm.
when you get after 8 kids, it's like, it's a big thing. And so I
Mhm.
think that we realize it just, everyone has their cross to carry,
Mhm.
and they look different and they feel different. And I think if we just, if we don't like sort of rank them as worse, or
Yes.
think that I have it worse than you or you have it worse than me or anything like that, I think it's just, we just need to come together, get off
Mhm.
our phones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And try to make fewer assumptions because you're right that that is the
Yes.
natural thing to
Yes.
do, but it doesn't help us and it doesn't help the people we're making assumptions about. It's so hard not to
Yep.
do, but
Oh, it's so hard.
yeah.
I know. You can write their whole story just staring at the back of their head in church.
Yeah. How bad is
Which
that? It's
which
so
on
bad.
so many levels is bad.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, and social media doesn't help with that either because then we
No.
think we know more about people than we do, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
a dangerous game. So,
Mhm.
this is totally changing gears, and maybe this just
Okay.
shows my absolute ignorance as it comes to these issues, but I can you share what it was like breastfeeding your son? Like, I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
know that you could breastfeed an adopted baby after not having just given birth. Like, I should have known
Yeah.
that because I knew you could, like, induce lactation, but I'd never connected those dots, and that part just fascinated me, so I would love if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have this friend, she makes a couple of appearances in the book. She's actually one of the people who has sent me a photo of her in the book. She's already got it in the mail. She was a friend of mine. She had a little bit of trouble getting pregnant too, and so we had sort of like, talked about that together. But then she did get pregnant, and she was a nurse midwife, and she was a big fan of nursing and breastfeeding, and I think it really was her when I think she had told me about it, and I thought, "That sounds great." But again, you think you have all this time, like, you think adoption is gonna take a long time, which is sort of why we started pursuing it almost immediately before we even thought about seeing Dr. Hilgers. Um, but with our first, it didn't really take very much time at all, and I had about a week to get ready, 2 weeks maybe, and I thought, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna shelve this breastfeeding thing because I can't on top of everything else, I've got this DuPont Circle apartment, I've got to get ready for a baby, I have nothing."
Mhm,
Um, so she said to me, she was like, Lee, you would have wanted to do it. You would have wanted to breastfeed your baby. That was a thing that you liked, and why don't you just try? Why don't you just go downtown to the Breastfeeding Center of Washington and talk to a lactation consultant?"
mhm.
And I'll tell you what, listeners, lactation consultants love when adoptive moms want to breastfeed. It's like they're like Mount Everest. And and again, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. I didn't have a lot of time, and so I used what's called a supplemental nursing system, an SNS. And some others use it when they have a low milk supply, and
Mhm,
it's kind of like a juice box size little canteen, and you can hang it around your neck with a string, and then you have a catheter that meets up with your nipple. And when the baby latches on, it's the tiniest little tube that takes the a formula or donated breast milk out of the canteen thing, and that it also stimulates the prolactin in your body to then produce. And I also took, like, supporting herbs and, another medication that, uh, is used for something else, but off label can have the side effect of producing lactation, and then
okay.
yeah, so that worked for me. Yeah.
That is the coolest thing. Like, I read that and my mind was blown and I was like, "This is awesome," and I can't wait to ask her about this because it's super cool.
Oh, I'm so glad because I really like talking about it, but I don't not everybody likes to talk about it. And, so especially, like, when people are like, "Oh, we wanted to tell you, thanks for talking to us about infertility or adoption, or whatever. We're adopting a baby." And I'm like, "You gotta nurse it." And I come on a little bit too strong, so I try not to lead with that. But I think you're right. I think a lot of people don't. I mean, I had a book called, like, Breastfeeding the Adopted Baby, but I think there's a lot more information about that now,
Mhm,
and a lot more lactation consultants are familiar with it.
okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I recommend it. It was really great. It's a nice, wonderful oxytocin boost. It's nice to have your body cooperate
Mhm.
and just do something a little bit normal. But
Yeah.
again, I think it takes it's I think if you can build a full supply, a lot of people do that. A lot of people, when they just start the adoption process, will start the whole protocol with pumping, and they end up being able to freeze some breast milk, and then there's a whole big thing. I never had that time.
Mhm.
Um, lead up time,
Right.
so I was more, I mean, we used to call it recreational. It was, like, more comfort nursing. I mean, I made some milk, but we did have to
Mhm.
supplement with formula, and my kids are great, and they had a lot of formula, so I think no pressure either way,
Right,
you know?
right,
Yeah,
right, totally. Well,
yeah.
there's so much that happens through breastfeeding too, where, like, signals between your body and the baby's body and all of that. Does that occur in those instances as well? I would imagine that it does to some degree.
Yeah, I would think so. I think when you both are, like, experience, like, the oxytocin together, I think there's something that happens there. I mean
Yeah.
I mean, some things happen. I mean, my kids are like barnacles, even though they're big now. I mean, like, they just wanna be close to me all the time, and,
Mhm.
um, so I don't know, but we're kind of a huggy family. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very special thing, and, actually, I've known even adoptive mothers who have not even, tried to induce the actual lactation, but have just comfort nursed, and I think that's a beautiful thing too, and I think that's something we don't talk about. I think people think it's kinda weird. Some people think just normal breastfeeding is weird, so, I mean, I think you just gotta do what's right for you and your
Yeah.
baby.
I look at it
Yeah.
as just another fruitful part of the story, like, it's just super cool and, like, another thing
Yeah.
that was redeemed. That was really, really awesome.
Awesome.
You talk in the book also just about, like, entering into perimenopause or the menopause part of your life and what you
Mhm.
call grieving fertility you never had. Can you just speak to that a little bit and kind of what that process has been like for you and how you're dealing with that?
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, it's not weird is not a very precise word. Um, just I'm kind of in the thick of it right now. Perimenopause is just not for the faint of heart, even though apparently we're all destined for it. Um,
So
it's
much about womanhood is not for the faint of heart.
right, exactly, and it's just so many hormones and things going up and down and deciding what to do and how to treat it and things, and I always wonder too, like, if, because there wasn't any, I think I mean, I'm sure, like, if you let's say you're a mom of, like, 5 or 6, there becomes a certain point in time where, you haven't gotten pregnant in 2 or 3 years. You think, "Oh, okay, this is where I am now. This isn't gonna happen," But,
Mhm.
you've had these kids and it's, I don't know, it's just there's no it just seems to last forever too. I mean, the perimenopause, I mean, they say 10, 15 years. There's no cutoff, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it was
right.
only really, like, somehow it took, I mean, somehow turning 50, I'm like, "Okay, this has gotta there's gotta be it,"
Mhm.
Because, yeah, I've heard people, like, in their late 40s get pregnant, but also I think those people had also been pregnant before. It's just, I mean, it's a maybe my tongue-tied, crazy, nonsensical things shows you, like, what those emotions are like, because it really is a very strange thing because it's I mean, for me, really, it's just, like, sort of closing technically, like, just closing the chapter on menstruation, hopefully,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's I know yes, because it's the grieving for the fertility I never had,
Mhm.
and, to always live with that little bit of a hope, little tiny hope that maybe you're gonna get pregnant, maybe there's gonna be some weird
Mhm.
thing, like, as you get older, sometimes you, like, dump a couple extra eggs out because your body's getting ready, and, maybe one of those, maybe, you never
Mhm.
know, right?
Mhm.
You're open to the possibility of a miracle, and to realize, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna be one of those stories."
Mhm.
For real. I mean, that
Yeah.
probably was true, like, 10 years ago, but to really, like, it's really, really happening now, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, luckily we have I mean, there seems to be a whole, commercial side to perimenopause now. There must be enough of us doing it that it's everywhere, and everyone's at least talking about that. There's an article about it, I feel like, in my news feed, every other article, although I'm sure Big Brother is targeting me.
I'm sure.
Um, yeah, but yeah, that it is strange to do that, to have that kind of, like, yeah, I mean, so I wrote the book. The end of the
Mhm.
story.
Yeah.
End of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet there is still so much more to the story. Like, you have is it a 3-year-old?
Yes.
Yes, so there is so much yet to be written, and that's
Yeah.
also exciting that, just because this chapter is closing, like, you may have grandbabies ahead, you may have you still have so much child rearing ahead. It's just it's also
Yes.
such an exciting time, even though I'm sure there is a lot of grief just that accompanies, like, finally fully closing that chapter, but
Yeah.
not the book. There's a lot left to be written there.
Right. But even little things like, that my youngest, because I was 47 when he was born, he's probably most likely not going to have any little siblings.
Mhm.
And it's like something that never really occurred to me before, that obviously the last whoever is last doesn't have any little siblings.
Right.
But now that and growing up an only child too, those are kind of things I'm learning just from seeing my own children. But seeing how my middle 2 and my eldest, are together, and the way my middle 2, like, really grew into big brothers with the
Mm.
arrival of Gigi, our little one. Um, it just, you think like, "Oh, the last one, the caboose doesn't get, another caboose."
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah, that's hard. That's
yeah.
hard. Well, maybe, your oldest will have children that will kind of take that place, that role,
Oh, yeah,
and he'll
he's
get to experience
definitely
what it's like to be a big brother even though they're not his
right.
younger siblings, yeah.
He is
That
definitely
would be a
dad
joy.
material. Mhm, yep. In fact, at his little Montessori preschool, they did one of those videos where they interview all the kids, like, "What do you wanna be when you grow up?" And, a fireman, a princess, a ballerina. He said, "A dad." And
Oh,
so, yeah, I think we're gonna definitely get some grandbabies out of that
so
one.
sweet, so
Yeah.
sweet. You share in your book stories of friends who have suffered with male factor infertility specifically. And, of course, when you think about infertility, and this is another assumption, but you think of a lot of
Mhm.
husbands supporting their wives through infertility and kind of what that looks
Yep.
like. And of course, there's a certain kind of grief that accompanies men struggling through infertility, but there's also so much of it that is grieving not having a pregnancy, which is unique to women. So it's such
Right.
a different thing that men and women struggle with. But specifically for couples who struggle with this male factor infertility, how can wives love and support their husbands well through that?
I think it's just like how we can do it through everything by listening, by asking the right questions, asking open-ended questions, understanding that their grieving might be different from yours, being very careful not to place any blame. I think men really, because so often it is something wrong with going on with the woman that men really are husbands are just like rise to the occasion and are just like princes to not do that because we already feel guilty,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
I think we have to be careful, not to do that to our husbands as well. I was really glad that my friend contributed her story because I actually didn't know until she shared it with me that
mm,
that was why they were infertile. And I think because people don't talk about it, people keep quiet about it, and it's such a strange sort of. I mean, I do like a man that's a protector and like all those masculine virtues, but it is sort of like an outdated thing that we would think that he's somehow less of a man because he's got some sort of vascular issue that
right,
causes this problem. You know what I mean? It's
right,
just a medical
absolutely,
problem, and again, I think that's the next. I mean, that's another one of the steps that needs to be talked about as well. And I think that there's it's probably not a bad idea to address young men to be like, these are the things that you can do to make sure, or these are the exams you should get, or more awareness that that actually is a thing that happens. It's not just a punchline.
right, right,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, and that starts early. I mean, there's so many things we do to fuel our bodies and, things that men and women consume that, maybe women are thinking about how it might affect their fertility, but men might not be
Right.
thinking about how it's affecting them, and so
Well,
they're very
yeah.
important conversations to have and things to keep in mind, but, at the end of the day, that stuff can still happen, and it's just, like, trying to support and love the best that you can. Um,
Mhm. And
on
I think
that
actually oh, sorry, I was just gonna
No,
add
go
a little
ahead.
bit to it.
Go ahead.
I think that even when it is female factor infertility, wives really need to remember that their husbands are grieving too.
Mhm.
And it's not just about you, and so much of the attention is on you, but you're the one that's not pregnant, you're the one at the doctor's, you're the one having
Right.
the test, you're the one with the injections. But they're sad too. They're sad for you. I mean, it's a very multi-layered kind of grieving that you're both doing together. And I think it's important to take the time to listen and not just assume that they're okay and that they're just there to be your rock to lean on.
Right. Right. Because, infertility can take such a toll on marriages, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's also such a gift to experience it in marriage because you are not doing it alone. So, if husbands and wives
Yes.
can support each other well, that is truly the best gift that you could have when you're walking through something that is one of the most difficult things you can walk through. To innately be doing it with another person is just
Yeah.
that's a sweet kindness from the Lord. Um,
Yes.
yeah, to have that support that's just built
Yeah.
in.
No, it's amazing.
Speaking of support, how would you advise friends who maybe are very fertile or family members who are very fertile? How can they best love and support and understand um, what infertile couples are struggling with, and how can they be good friends to them? It's hard to know, like, if you're struggling with infertility, like there's still going to be that pregnant friend that you have or whatever. Like, how does that
Yep.
person love you well without like, you know, b it being in your face that, like, they are not struggling with this thing? Like, that's a really tough dynamic, and I just love your
It
insight on
really
that.
is. It really is tough, and I think that it sometimes can place that fertile person, pregnant person in a unfair position, um, because, you can have moments where that person can't do the right thing for you, you
Mhm,
know? They're just they have their everything, they have everything that they want, and you don't,
mhm,
and your attitude's terrible. But I think if, your true loved ones, if they can sort of weather those days, along with, I think, some practical tips just from conversation is not to make comparisons between yourself and them or comparisons or like say things like, "Oh, I wish I could have a baby for you,"
mm,
or, lament your own fertility or things. Those are just like sort of normal, I think, rules about talking to other people.
mhm,
They apply here too. Again, I think not excluding them from groups. I when I first moved here, I joined, like most young moms do. We all had found each other through different ways, like at the gym or through work or whatever. And we had a little moms group and we met every week and our kids were all about the same age. And a woman who I knew who had experienced infertility for a while but was adopting from China, she asked if she could join our group even before the baby came.
mm,
And I think that was really great for her because otherwise, she just felt like, she wasn't with this group, she wasn't with that group. And so I think, I think you can say things like, "Listen, I'm gonna have these friends over. Everyone's bringing their babies. Is this something you wanna do or something you don't wanna do?" Again, I think bringing it up in the first place, if your friend hasn't told you, but you suspect they're experiencing infertility, that's the really hard part.
mm.
But, I think just the general like, everybody, like, "Is there anything I can pray for you about? Are you doing okay?
Yeah.
Like, how are things going? You guys have any" I think there are ways to open up without the pressure. But I think that's good because, again, they're already putting so much pressure on themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Before we close here, I just want to bring it all back to the gospel because that really does infuse so much of the book too. And I was really struck. I was like making notes in the margin as I was reading this part, but just the concept of carrying your cross and everybody having a different cross to carry. And I just this quote from Father Sebastian White really
Oh, yeah, isn't that
stood
so
out to
good?
me. It was so good, and it's so it's so obvious. It's such like an innate part of the gospel. Like this is not rocket science. This is basic stuff. But as I was
Yeah.
reading it, it still just stuck out to me, and I was just like kind of meditating on it and pondering how important this is. That quote is. This is just part of it, but it is precisely through the cross that the Lord shows his love for us. And I was just thinking about the fact that, like, Jesus died on the cross that he asks us to carry. Like, he does
Mhm.
not ask more of us than he asked of his own son. And it's just like, that's a hard thing to grasp, but it's also such a beautiful and comforting thing that, like, the hardest things that we go through are still just like, he knows our suffering because he's done that. Like,
Right.
he carried the cross and died
As a
on the cross.
man.
Yes, yes, as a
Yes.
man. And I
Yeah.
just yeah, just if you can talk a little bit about what that means to you and, how that has gotten you through some of these dark
Yeah,
times.
somebody asked me a similar question recently, and I've been thinking about it even this morning, and, I do think that and we've talked a lot about it today about how infertility or pregnancy, all of it, and just being a woman is just I mean, it really is true for everyone, but it's just a fleshy experience. It's, like
Mhm.
we're dealing with sex, we're dealing with checkups, we're dealing with blood and
Yes.
all kinds of fluids and, things and the limits of your body. And, you can have this will and this heart and this soul that desires motherhood and your body's not cooperating and you're suffering and you live in this world in time and you realize that God did that too. God entered the world. God entered time as a man and suffered. And it's humbling. And when you embrace that and pick up your cross and carry it, you feel drawn into Jesus. And we know not to me he suffered, died on the cross. And the cross is now a symbol of joy and love.
Mhm.
And so that's what we find. We find that good news of salvation in that through his suffering. And I think when you just realize I mean, this like the fact that God became man for us puts suffering in this sort of corporeal way into perspective,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the way that the example of Christ through his suffering and just, you know, I'm reading in the book of Luke right now, and I've been reading about, that the crowds are pressing in on him, and Jesus is just like finding a desolate place to pray. Like he is God incarnate, and yet he is just constantly communing with the Father. And then, as he's facing his own crucifixion, which is it's his whole mission. Like it's what he knows he's here to do. He was born to do this thing, and he's still just pleading with the Father that, like, if there's any way. And obviously, when he's talking about the cup passing, he's talking about the cup of God's wrath. Like he's talking about the punishment for sin. And yet, there's so much of that we do where we just plead with the Father. Like, if there is any way that you can
Yeah.
let this difficult thing that I really don't want to do pass,
Yep.
and so that I don't have to experience it, like, please do that. And just like the fact that that cup did not pass, it was poured out fully on Christ.
Mhm.
And like the redemption that we can have through that reality, and just like on such a smaller scale but no less real, we experience these things that we plead with the Father, like, if there's any way that we don't have to do this thing,
Right.
please.
Yep.
And sometimes he takes it away, and sometimes he marches us right through it. And there is no, there is still so much joy and so much redemption, and it's just like such a picture of what we experience in Christ, all of that fullness. But we can also experience that, like, as we commune with God, and as he does call us to suffer like Christ suffered. And yet there is joy, and there is love, and there is redemption. And I was reminded of that with your book. It was so encouraging to me. um Everybody can get Leigh's book now, because by the time this airs, it will be out. That's so
Yep.
exciting. Don't sleep on that. Go get a copy of
Mm.
Leigh's book. You will not regret it. Leigh, where can people buy your book, and where can they find you online for more content and just more of your thoughts and to follow you?
Yeah. You can follow me at, well, you can look at my website, leighfitzpatricksnead.com. Um, you can also follow my work at thecatholicassociation.org. You can order my book at Barnes& Noble or Amazon, but it'd be best if you ordered it from Sophia Institute Press.
Awesome. That's always good to know. Yeah, don't give your money to Amazon.
Yeah.
Give it to Sophia Institute Press. So, Leigh, thank you so much for your time today. It was truly a
Thank
pleasure
you
to talk
so
to
much,
you, and
Kylie. You
I'm
too.
so excited to hear just everybody's feedback on your book, because I know they're going to love it. So, thanks again for
Yeah.
being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Kylee Cast. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Leave us a 5-star review. It's such an easy way for you to help out the show so much. And go get a copy of Leigh Fitzpatrick Snead's brand new book, Infertile But Fruitful. It is a delightful read, and you will not be disappointed. I will be right back here next week with more. So until then, just remember, the truth hurts, but it won't kill you.